My sister-in-law blocked me from warning a pregnant client. She was breathing fumes that cause miscarriages, then announced I was just jealous in front of the whole salon. When I begged her to stop, she smiled and said she paid for the deluxe package. I'm not disturbing a paying customer because of your jealousy. I just stared at her. That was 19 months ago. Yesterday, she read something in a went completely still and hasn't eaten since. I confronted a beauty salon for using illegal products known to cause miscarriages on a pregnant customer, and they accused me of trying to get free nails. So I've been a nail tech for 12 years now, and last week I treated myself to my sister-in-law's new high-end salon in Miami. The place was gorgeous. Marble counters, champagne bar, the works. It cost $200 for a gel set, which is very pricey, but I wanted to support family. As I walked in, I noticed this heavily pregnant woman, 8 months along, heading to the back room for her deluxe pedicure. I was excited about the nails, but then I sat down, and that smell hit me. Sharp, acrid, unmistakable. MMA, methyl methacrylate, the illegal stuff that bonds so strong it can literally rip your nail bed clean off. But something worse were those OPI polish bottles. Not only were they the classic $2 knockoffs, but the worst part was that they contained the toxic trio: toluene, formaldehyde, and dibutyl phthalate. That's when my stomach dropped. The pregnant woman I had just seen was in a closed room breathing concentrated fumes from these products. Fumes known to cause miscarriages and birth defects. I stood up immediately. I need to speak to the owner. The nail tech rolled her eyes, whispered another Karen to her coworker. My sister-in-law Reagan came out all fake smiles until she saw it was me. What's wrong now? You always have something to say. Reagan, you're using banned products. These fumes cause permanent damage. You're being dramatic. We use professional products. There's a pregnant woman in your back room right now breathing fumes that cause birth defects. The FDA banned this specifically for reproductive harm. That's fear-mongering. Hundreds of pregnant women come here. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I have 12 years experience. MMA doesn't break down like EMA. When clients remove these, their actual nails will tear off with them. Some women get permanent nerve damage. Let me guess, Reagan said loudly, making sure other customers heard. You want free services because we're family? Is this your angle? Trying to get comped nails? The accusation stunned me. Are you serious? There's a baby at risk. A customer spoke up. Wait, is that why my nails have been peeling? Another added, mine too, and I get headaches every time I leave here. Women started comparing experiences. Brittle nails, breathing problems, that burning sensation during application that wasn't supposed to happen. I was desperate now. That back room has no ventilation. The fumes accumulate. She's been in there like 15 minutes already. Every minute increases the risk. She paid for the deluxe package, Reagan said coldly. I'm not disturbing a paying customer because of your jealousy. Jealousy? I was shouting now. We're supposed to be women protecting other women. Every client here trusts you. You're just mad I'm making more than your little shop. Always have been. A customer stood up. If there's really a pregnant woman back there, someone needs to get her. Reagan physically blocked her. No one's disturbing my clients. More women were standing now, half-done nails and all. Are you seriously stopping us from warning a pregnant woman? Reagan hissed at me. Keep talking and I'll call the health department about your expired licenses last year. I know all about your violations. The manager started escorting me out. I shouted over my shoulder, check your bottles. Google MMA damage. Those fumes cause miscarriages. As I'm being pushed toward the door, one of the nail techs slipped me a note, mouthing, thank you. That's when this older woman, maybe 60, stood up and just went, oh hell no. She marched straight to that back room. Reagan tried blocking her, but now 5-6 women were joining her. Open this door right now. Reagan had no choice. They found the pregnant woman relaxed in the massage chair, completely unaware, surrounded by thick fumes. The women gently explained everything, helped her up and grabbed her things. One offered to drive her to the hospital. The poor girl was horrified, kept saying, I didn't know, oh god, my baby. I didn't care about family at that point. This salon could ruin lives, and I wasn't having that. I immediately called the health department myself. I filed a formal complaint, then called my mother-in-law who financed the whole salon. I told her I was sorry, but the salon needed to shut down. She was furious, but not at me. The next morning, the health inspector showed up. Reagan called me screaming, you did this? We're family. You put a baby at risk for profit, I said. It probably would have lived. Can you even hear yourself right now? I shouted back. 20 minutes later, the inspection was done, resulting in immediate shutdown pending investigation. My mother-in-law pulled all funding instantly, but here's where it gets interesting. Reagan arrived at the scene and cornered me at the inspection. You think you won? She hissed. My best friend from college is the district health inspector for your area. Remember that expired license issue last year? She helped you because I asked her to. She leaned in closer, smiling. Let's just say she'll be very thorough when she visits your salon next week. Every bottle, every tool, every certificate, every little violation. She walked away, then turned back. Oh, and that pregnant woman, her husband's a lawyer. I'll make sure he knows your salon uses the same supplier I did, even if it's not true. Good luck proving otherwise when you're closed for investigation. My eyes went wide, knowing this was just the beginning. I drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel, and when I walked through the front door, Elena was in our bedroom throwing clothes into his black duffel bag. His jaw was tight, and he wouldn't look at me as he grabbed his phone charger from the nightstand. I asked what he was doing, and he just kept packing, shoving his work shirts into the bag without folding them. He finally said Reagan called him crying about losing everything, and he couldn't believe I would destroy his sister's business like that. He zipped the bag and walked past me to the bathroom to grab his toothbrush. I followed him saying Reagan was using illegal products that could hurt people, but he just shook his head and said, I always had something against his family. He walked to the front door with a bag over his shoulder and told me he needed space to process what I'd done. The door clicked shut, and I stood there in our empty hallway staring at nothing. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, still in yesterday's clothes, and grabbed my phone to check the time, but my salon's Instagram was blowing up with notifications. Dozens of one-star reviews were flooding in, claiming I used the same toxic products I'd accused Reagan of using. Someone posted screenshots from a group chat called Support Reagan, where her friends were coordinating the attack and telling each other what to write. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through review after review saying I was a hypocrite and a liar who destroyed an innocent woman's business. 3 hours later, I was at my salon trying to respond to the reviews when Valerie Shaw walked in with 2 other people in health department jackets. She smiled at me and said they were here for a routine inspection, but the way she said routine made it clear this was anything but. They started photographing every single bottle on my shelves, while one inspector pulled out swabs to test surfaces for chemical residue. Valerie stood next to me with her clipboard asking about my licensing dates, and when I'd last renewed my certifications. She wanted to see all my purchase orders from the last 2 years and receipts for every product in the salon. The other inspectors were opening drawers and cabinets, taking pictures of everything, even the cleaning supplies under the sink. They spent 3 hours going through everything while my morning appointment sat in the waiting area watching this happen. Valerie finally said they'd need to close the salon for 48 hours pending test results and handed me a yellow notice to post on the door. My phone rang as they were leaving, and it was Carmen Rodriguez, her voice shaking as she told me she'd gone to the hospital after leaving Reagan's salon. The test showed concerning levels of chemical exposure in her system, and her doctor wanted to monitor the baby closely for the remaining weeks of her pregnancy. She asked if I would testify about what I saw at the salon if she needed expert testimony, and I told her absolutely. After she hung up, I sat alone in my empty salon that evening with a yellow notice on the door, calculating on my phone how much money I'd lose from 2 days of closure. A white envelope was slipped under the door, and when I opened it, my senior tech Maria had left a resignation letter saying she couldn't afford the drama and needed stable work to support her kids. The next morning, Diane showed up at my salon before I'd even unlocked the door, her face red as she demanded I retract my complaint immediately. She grabbed my arm and said she'd invested $400,000 in Reagan's salon, and she wasn't going to let my jealousy destroy the family investment. She leaned in close and said if I didn't fix this, she'd make sure Elena divorced me, and I'd never see another family holiday again. I pulled my arm away and told her Reagan was poisoning people, but she just said I'd always been jealous of Reagan's success. 3 days later, I met Sophia at a small coffee shop downtown, where she slid her phone across the table showing me photos of boxes in Reagan's storage room. The labels clearly showed the banned chemicals, and she had receipts proving Reagan had been buying from an unlicensed supplier for 2 years to save thousands each month. Sophia said Reagan bragged about the profit margins and how stupid clients were for not knowing the difference. I'm really curious about how Reagan's whole system worked. Like, did she train her workers to lie about the products too? The way that Nail Tech slipped the narrator a note makes me wonder if the staff knew something was wrong but were scared to speak up. How does someone even find illegal suppliers for nail products? That night, I couldn't sleep and drove past Reagan's apartment complex around 10 p.m. Elena's car was in the visitor parking, and when I looked up at Reagan's window, I could see them through the sheer curtains having dinner with Diane. They were laughing about something, and Elena was pouring wine while Reagan showed them something on her phone. The next day, Marcus Rodriguez called me saying he was investigating the salon for potential litigation since Carmen's exposure levels were dangerously high. He asked if I could provide expert testimony about industry standards and explain exactly why MMA was so dangerous for pregnant women. I agreed to meet with him and started pulling together all my certification materials and industry guideline documents. That afternoon, Reagan posted a video on Instagram with tears streaming down her face, claiming I'd always been jealous of her success and was trying to steal her clients. She said I couldn't stand seeing her salon doing better than mine, and that I'd made up lies to destroy her. The video went viral in the Miami beauty community, with the hashtag #JealousSister-in-law trending, and hundreds of comments calling me horrible names. A week later, my salon was still closed, and the padlock on the door felt heavier every time I saw it. I spent that whole Monday calling my client list one by one to cancel appointments. The Anderson wedding party with 12 bridesmaids gone. The Torres Quinceañera package I'd been planning for 6 months canceled. My appointment book that was full through next year now had red lines through every single name. By noon, I'd lost 43 clients who said they couldn't wait and would find other salons. My phone rang, and it was Valerie Shaw from the health department. She said they found irregularities in my product samples that needed extended investigation. She mentioned it could take 4 to 6 months unless I withdrew my complaint against Reagan's salon immediately. I hung up on her and drove straight to Carmen's house in Coral Gables. Carmen opened the door looking pale and exhausted. She told me she'd been getting headaches every day since the exposure at Reagan's salon. Her breathing was shallow and she kept rubbing her temples. Marcus was in the living room with a notebook documenting every symptom and keeping all her medical records in a folder. He showed me photos of her swollen fingers and the rash that appeared on her arms. Carmen said her doctor was worried about the baby and ordered weekly monitoring. I left their house feeling sick and went home to check our bank account online. The screen showed $0 in our joint account. Elena had cleaned it out completely. There was a note in my email saying he was protecting our assets from my destructive behavior. I checked my business account and found $3,000 that had to cover both my rent and salon expenses. 2 weeks after the original incident, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. She said Reagan was having a grand reopening tomorrow with free champagne and 50% off all services. The health department supposedly found no violations even though my investigation was still ongoing. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I drove to the health department office downtown and found Valerie at her desk. I hit record on my phone in my pocket before walking up to her. She looked annoyed when she saw me, but I stayed calm and asked about Reagan's clearance. Valerie said something about professional courtesy and how she fast-tracked Reagan's paperwork while mine needed more thorough review. She actually admitted on my recording that she helped Reagan because they were friends. I left the office and went back to my closed salon where buyers were coming to look at my equipment. I needed money for rent, so I had to sell everything. They loaded my LED lamp system that took me 3 years to save for. My autoclave that cost $4,000 went next. Each piece of equipment leaving felt like watching my career get erased. My nail stations, my massage chairs, even my reception desk all got loaded into trucks. 3 of my former clients messaged me that same day with photos. They'd gone to Reagan's reopening and now had chemical burns on their fingers. One woman, Sarah, had infected nail beds that were oozing pus. Another client, Lisa's entire hand was swollen and red. They said the burning started during the service, but Reagan's staff said it was normal. 3 weeks after everything started, Elena showed up at my empty salon with papers. He brought Reagan with him for emotional support, which made me want to scream. Reagan stood there smiling while Elena handed me separation documents. She leaned in close and said this could all stop if I just apologized publicly for lying about her salon. I grabbed the papers and told them both to get out. Marcus called me that night saying he'd filed a complaint with the state health department bypassing Valerie completely. He included my testimony and all the evidence Sophia had given us about the illegal products. He said his lawyer friend was helping him navigate the system properly. The state investigators were taking it seriously because of Carmen's medical documentation. 2 weeks passed and my bank account hit zero after Elena stopped paying his half of the mortgage. I packed everything I could fit into my car and drove to the Sunset Motel on Highway 1, one of those places that rents by the week. The room smelled like old cigarettes, and the AC made this clicking sound every few minutes. I stacked my boxes against the wall and sat on the bed with a scratchy comforter. My phone kept buzzing with texts from old clients asking when I'd reopen, but I had no answer. 3 more weeks went by, and I was eating ramen every night when Marcus called saying Channel 7 wanted to interview me. He told me not to talk to them yet since 3 pregnant women had just come forward about getting sick at Reagan's salon. The reporter kept calling and leaving messages, but Marcus said we needed to wait for the right time. I was heating up another cup of noodles when someone pounded on my motel door. Reagan stood there with 2 huge guys behind her. One had neck tattoos and the other kept cracking his knuckles. She shoved papers at me demanding I sign a statement saying I lied about everything. When I refused, she leaned in close and said Elena told her about my anxiety medication and how it would be a shame if people thought I was unstable. The big guys stepped closer, but I slammed the door and called Marcus right away. He said to save everything and document any threats. 2 days later, Sophia texted asking to meet at a coffee shop downtown. She looked scared and kept checking over her shoulder while showing me recordings on her phone of Reagan talking to suppliers about the illegal products. She said she'd testify if I could keep her safe, but I couldn't even keep myself safe. Marcus's wife Carmen had another ultrasound that week, and the doctor found something wrong with the baby's development. The doctor couldn't say for sure it was from the chemicals, but the pattern matched toxic exposure cases he'd seen before. Carmen cried the whole drive home, according to Marcus. 6 weeks after everything started, the Florida Department of Health sent state inspectors to Reagan's salon for a formal investigation. Reagan texted me a photo of the inspectors with a message that I'd just declared war on the wrong family. The next morning, I tried ordering supplies for when I could eventually reopen, but every company said my account was canceled. I called 5 different suppliers, and they all said Reagan had contacted them claiming my business was shut down permanently. Without professional supplies, I couldn't work even if I wanted to. Elena's mother called me that night crying about how the family was torn apart with Reagan and Elena on one side and her not knowing what to believe. She kept saying she loved me like a daughter, but couldn't understand why I'd destroy the family business. I tried explaining about the pregnant women, but she just cried harder. The state inspectors found evidence that Valerie had been falsifying health reports for Reagan's salon and suspended her immediately pending investigation. Valerie posted all over social media blaming me for ruining her career before her department ordered her to stop all contact. 2 months after the original incident, I found an eviction notice taped to my motel door giving me 72 hours to leave. The motel manager said the owner was Reagan's friend from college and I had to go. Marcus called that afternoon saying I could stay in his guest house since I was too important as a witness to lose track of. I packed my few things from the motel and drove to Marcus's place that same evening. The guest house was small but clean with a kitchenette and bathroom behind their main house. Carmen was 7 months pregnant now and could barely bend down to tie her shoes. Every morning I helped her with basic stuff like putting on socks and picking things up off the floor. We spent hours sitting on her back porch while she rubbed her belly and told me about the headaches she still got. Marcus worked long hours at his construction company, so I drove Carmen to her doctor appointments and grocery runs. 3 days after I moved in, my phone started blowing up with notifications. Reagan had posted a video on every social media platform showing the health department notice on her salon door. She stood there crying, saying I planted evidence because I was jealous of her success. The comment section was full of her regular customers calling me every name you could think of. Then came the official notice that she was suing me for defamation and lost income. My hands shook as I read the amount she wanted, which was more money than I'd make in 10 years. Carmen found me crying at the kitchen table and rubbed my back while I called around for lawyers. The way Reagan keeps finding new ways to hurt her sister-in-law is so strange. First the fake tears video, then bringing those scary guys to the motel, and now suing for more money than anyone could pay. Most wanted $5,000 just to look at the case. But finally I found a pro bono attorney downtown who agreed to meet me. The law office was in an old building with flickering lights and water stains on the ceiling. The attorney was this older woman named Patricia, who'd been doing consumer protection cases for 30 years. She looked through my documentation and shook her head saying Reagan had hired Miller and Associates, who were known for dragging cases out until people went bankrupt from legal fees. Patricia said she'd take my case but warned me it would get ugly fast. That night Diane called my cell phone, which shocked me since we hadn't talked in months. Her voice was quiet, like she didn't want anyone to hear her. She said she knew Reagan had gone too far, but she'd already invested her entire retirement into the salon. She couldn't publicly support me but promised she wouldn't help Reagan's case either. I thanked her and we hung up without saying goodbye. Over the next few days my phone kept ringing with unknown numbers. 3 different women who used to work at Reagan's salon wanted to tell me their stories. They each described being forced to use products they knew were dangerous or lose their jobs. One girl said she got chemical burns on her hands, but Reagan threatened to blacklist her if she reported it. Another said she quit after a pregnant client had a miscarriage 2 days after getting her nails done. The third one still had photos of the illegal product shipments Reagan made them unload after hours. I gave all their contact info to Patricia, who said this could change everything. Then Elena served me with divorce papers at the guest house while Carmen watched from the window. He wanted spousal support, claiming I'd hidden assets even though he'd emptied our joint accounts. The paperwork showed Reagan's attorney friend had referred him to a divorce lawyer. I realized Reagan was coaching him on how to destroy me financially from every angle. I started applying to other salons around Miami, but nobody would even interview me. One owner straight up told me Reagan had called warning them I was trouble. Another said they couldn't risk hiring someone facing defamation lawsuits. Word had spread through the entire beauty industry network that I was basically radioactive. Every rejection email felt like another door slamming in my face. Carmen tried to stay positive, but I could see the stress wearing on her. One morning she woke up with bad cramps and back pain even though she was only 34 weeks along. I helped her to the bathroom where she noticed some bleeding and started panicking. We rushed to the hospital with me driving while she gripped the door handle through contractions. She kept saying over and over that it was too early and something was wrong. The nurses got her into a room fast and hooked up monitors showing the baby's heart rate dropping with each contraction. The doctor said they needed to do an emergency C-section right away. Marcus arrived just as they wheeled her to surgery, and we waited in this tiny room that smelled like disinfectant. 40 minutes later, a nurse came out saying Carmen had delivered a girl, but the baby was having trouble breathing. They'd taken her straight to the NICU with underdeveloped lungs, and she needed oxygen support. Marcus grabbed my shoulders hard enough to bruise and said this was evidence of what Reagan's chemicals girls did. We spent the next 3 days practically living at the hospital watching this tiny baby fight to breathe. Carmen could barely look at her daughter through all the tubes and wires without breaking down. The NICU doctor said premature birth could have many causes, but chemical exposure during pregnancy was definitely a risk factor. Meanwhile, Patricia had been digging into Reagan's supplier and found something huge. The state health department's investigation revealed the supplier had been importing banned chemicals from China for 5 years. They'd been mixing them with legitimate products and selling to salons across Florida. Reagan's salon was listed as their biggest customer, ordering triple what any other salon bought monthly. The investigation found she'd been getting the products at 70% below market price, which explained her massive profits. 3 months later, I stood in my empty salon with the keys in my hand. The landlord had given me 1 week before he'd rent it to someone else. I walked to the back wall where my certificates used to hang. 12 years of training and awards that meant nothing now. The nail stations were gone, but I could still see the marks on the floor where they'd been. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, who'd worked at Reagan's salon before everything went down. She said she had something important to show me and could meet in an hour. I drove to the coffee shop where she was already waiting with her laptop open. She pushed play on a video, and there was Reagan talking to her staff 2 weeks before the raid. "If anyone asks about the products, you tell them we use OPI exclusively," Reagan said on the recording. "These pregnant women are so dramatic anyway. A little chemical won't hurt their babies." Sophia had recorded dozens of these staff meetings where Reagan told them to lie to customers and threatened to blacklist anyone who talked. The next recording showed Reagan on the phone with her supplier saying she knew exactly what she was buying and didn't care about the regulations. 2 days later, an FBI agent called me about the interstate commerce angle since the chemicals came from China through multiple states. Agent Morrison sat across from me in a federal building downtown, asking detailed questions about what Reagan knew and when she knew it. He showed me shipping manifests with Reagan's signature accepting deliveries marked as hazardous materials that she'd been telling everyone were safe beauty products. He said criminal charges were definitely coming and asked if I'd testify when the time came. That afternoon, I went to Carmen's apartment to help with a baby who'd been born 6 weeks early after the chemical exposure. Every 4 hours, we had to give him breathing treatments with a tiny mask over his face while he cried and fought against it. Between treatments, we just sat there watching him breathe, counting each rise and fall of his chest, both of us scared to say what we were thinking about the long-term damage. Carmen's husband, Marcus, had started keeping a journal of every treatment, every doctor visit, every sleepless night for the lawsuit he was planning. 14 weeks after everything started, I got a call from Agent Morrison saying they were arresting Reagan that morning on federal charges. I turned on the news, and there she was being led out of her house in handcuffs, still wearing designer clothes and her nails perfectly done with the same illegal products she'd poisoned people with. The mugshot they released later showed her trying to smile like this was all some misunderstanding. That night, Elena called me completely drunk, slurring about how Reagan had told him I was cheating with my supplier and that's why he'd left. He kept saying he wanted to come home and work things out, but I realized I didn't even recognize his voice anymore. The man I'd married would never have believed his sister over me without even asking for my side. I told him not to call again and blocked his number. The next morning, I started a blog about salon safety that I thought maybe 10 people would read. Within a week, I had thousands of followers sharing their own horror stories about chemical burns, lost pregnancies, and permanent nerve damage from salons cutting corners. Former employees from Reagan's place started reaching out with their own evidence and recordings. One girl sent me photos of the burns on her hands from handling the products without proper gloves that Reagan said weren't necessary. The courthouse was packed for Reagan's bail hearing 2 weeks later. Her lawyer argued she wasn't a flight risk, but then the prosecutor revealed she'd already transferred $400,000 to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Diane was sitting behind me and gasped when they said that number because that was every penny she'd invested in the salon, money she'd pulled from her retirement to help her daughter-in-law's dream business. The judge set bail at $2 million, which Reagan couldn't make without the money she'd already hidden. Then Reagan's lawyer played dirty and subpoenaed my mental health records from 3 years ago when I'd been on anxiety medication after my miscarriage. They wanted to paint me as unstable and vindictive, saying my testimony couldn't be trusted because of my mental health history. I had to decide whether to keep fighting and let everyone know about my private medical information or back down and let Reagan potentially walk free. Meanwhile, Carmen's baby was slowly getting better, but the doctor said he'd need breathing treatments for at least the next 5 years and maybe longer. Marcus filed a civil suit against Reagan for $2 million in current and future medical costs, plus pain and suffering for what their family had been through. The baby's breathing was getting stronger, but every cold, every cough sent them racing back to the emergency room, terrified that his damaged lungs couldn't handle it. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the waiting room at Glamour Nails corporate headquarters for a job interview I desperately needed. My savings were almost gone, and no salon in Miami would hire me after word got around about what happened with Reagan. The manager walked in wearing a perfect suit and sat down across from me with this fake smile. She looked at my resume for maybe 2 seconds before pushing it back across the table. "We know who you are. You're the whistleblower." She paused, and I thought maybe she was going to thank me, but then she kept going. That takes courage, but it also brings drama we don't need. I left that office feeling lower than I'd felt in months. Patricia taking this case pro bono makes me wonder how many other salons she's seen doing the same thing. Like, is Reagan just one of many using these dangerous products? That night, my phone buzzed with a Facebook message from someone named Sarah Martinez, who I didn't recognize. When I opened it, my heart started racing because it was clearly Reagan using a fake account. She was offering me $50,000 cash to drop everything and move out of state. The message said she could have the money to me within 24 hours if I agreed to sign papers saying I was wrong about the chemicals. I took screenshots of everything, including the profile details and the payment offer, then called the FBI agent who'd been handling the case. He told me to keep taking screenshots if more messages came and not to respond at all. Reagan kept sending messages for 3 more days, getting more and more desperate and angry when I didn't answer. The health department investigation had blown up way bigger than anyone expected, with 30 salons across Florida getting shut down for using the same toxic supplier Reagan had used. They needed me as their main expert witness since I had 12 years of experience and could explain exactly how these chemicals damaged people. I spent entire days at the health department office going through chemical compositions and safety standards and showing them how to identify the fake products. Sophia called me one afternoon asking if we could meet for coffee coffee because she needed to tell me something important. We sat in this little Cuban place and she started crying before she even ordered. She told me Reagan had been threatening her for months, saying she'd call immigration and get her deported if she ever spoke up about the salon. The thing was, Sophia had been a legal resident for 15 years, and Reagan knew it, but counted on her being too scared to risk it. "You gave me courage to do what's right," she said, wiping her eyes. 2 weeks before the trial was supposed to start, I got a call from a lawyer saying he represented my ex-husband in our divorce proceedings. I was confused because we'd been divorced for 3 years already, but then he explained that my ex was seeking 50% of my future earnings. His argument was that my career success and reputation as an expert witness was built during our marriage, so he deserved half of whatever I made from testifying or consulting. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but the lawyer said they were completely serious about pursuing it. 5 months after that first day at Reagan's salon, I walked into the federal courthouse for the start of the criminal trial. Reagan showed up in a designer dress and heels, looking like she was going to a charity gala instead of facing federal charges. Her lawyer immediately started his opening statement, calling this whole thing a vendetta by a jealous sister-in-law who wanted to destroy a successful businesswoman. The prosecutor called me as the first witness, and I spent 6 straight hours on that stand explaining every detail about the chemicals and their effects. Reagan's lawyer kept interrupting, trying to make me look unstable and suggesting I was just angry about family drama. He brought up my divorce and my financial problems, and even implied I was making this up for attention. During the lunch break, I ran to the courthouse bathroom and just sat in a stall with my hands shaking so bad I couldn't hold my phone steady. This woman came in and recognized my shoes under the stall door and said she'd been following the case. "Thank you for speaking up. My daughter is a nail tech." That gave me the strength to go back in there and keep testifying even when Reagan's lawyer got nasty. Carmen took the stand the next day, and the whole courtroom went silent when she started talking about her baby. She showed pictures of him in the NICU with tubes everywhere and machines helping him breathe. The jury members were visibly upset, and one woman had tears running down her face when Carmen described listening to her baby struggle for every breath. Reagan's lawyer tried to suggest maybe the baby had other health issues, but Carmen's medical records showed he was perfect until the chemical exposure. On the third day, Sophia testified, even though Reagan had sent people to her apartment the night before trying to scare her. She brought the recordings she'd secretly made of Reagan talking about the chemicals, including one where Reagan literally said she didn't care if customers got sick as long as they paid first. The prosecutor played the recording for the whole courtroom, and you could hear Reagan clear as day saying the cheap products saved her $8,000 a month. The judge called for a 15-minute recess after that recording played, and I watched Reagan's face go completely white. When we came back, Elena walked into the courtroom wearing his best suit and sat down right next to Diane on Reagan's side of the room. He looked straight at me for maybe 2 seconds before turning away to whisper something to his mother. That's when it hit me that our marriage was really done, and honestly, I felt lighter than I had in months. The prosecutor called Reagan to the stand next, and she put on this whole performance about how I'd always been jealous of her success. She claimed I planted those products in her salon the night before the inspection because I wanted to destroy her business. Her voice cracked at all the right moments and tears rolled down her face, but the prosecutor wasn't buying it. He asked her why the security footage from that night showed no one entering the salon after closing time. Then he asked how I could have ordered $8,000 worth of illegal products using her business accounts dating back 6 months. She kept changing her story and contradicting herself until even the judge was shaking his head. The next morning, they brought in the supplier who'd made a deal with the prosecutors to testify. This guy had receipts going back 2 years showing Reagan specifically requesting the banned MMA products because they lasted longer on clients. He showed invoices where she'd written notes asking for the strongest formulas available even after he warned her about the health risks. During the lunch break, I was getting water from the fountain when Diane walked up behind me. She stood there for a minute before saying she'd chosen money over what was right, and she should have listened to me from the start. I just nodded because what else was there to say at that point? 7 months after that day at the salon, the jury came back with their verdict after only 3 hours of deliberation. They found Reagan guilty on all 14 counts, including endangering public health and criminal fraud. The bailiffs put handcuffs on her right there in the courtroom, and her perfect makeup started running as she realized this was actually happening. A week later, letters started pouring in from former clients describing their health problems and asking the judge for the maximum sentence. I sat at my kitchen table for hours trying to decide if I should write my own statement, but kept starting and stopping. I ended up spending that week cleaning out my storage unit where I'd kept all my old salon supplies after my shop closed. Each box I loaded into my car to donate to the local beauty school felt like letting go of something I wasn't ready to release. The sentencing hearing came 2 weeks after that, and the judge didn't hold back at all. Reagan got 3 years in federal prison plus $2 million in fines that her insurance wouldn't cover. She screamed across the courtroom that I'd destroyed our family and asked if I was happy now. The bailiffs had to physically drag her out while she kept screaming about how this was all my fault. Marcus filed his civil suit the next month even though Reagan was already going to prison because the insurance company refused to pay for intentional harm. His lawyer told me they were going after her personal assets, which meant she'd lose everything including the house Diane had bought her. 8 months after everything started, I got a call from this huge salon chain asking if I wanted to run their new safety compliance department. It wasn't doing nails anymore, but they said my experience with toxic products made me perfect for protecting their employees and customers. The salary was triple what I'd made at my salon, but I still felt weird about taking it until Elena's lawyer called the next morning. He was contesting the divorce settlement, saying my new job proved I'd benefited from destroying Reagan's business, and therefore didn't deserve any assets. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, and I spent every night going through financial records, proving I'd lost everything before this offer came. When we got to court, Elena stood there in his expensive suit telling the judge I'd orchestrated everything to get ahead. The judge looked at my documentation showing months of unemployment, rejection letters from dozens of salons, and my bank statements showing I'd been living off credit cards. She dismissed his claims in under 10 minutes and granted me the divorce with no spousal support to him. Elena stormed out without looking at me. 3 days later, Carmen called crying, but they were happy tears this time. Her baby had just hit 24 hours breathing without any assistance for the first time since birth. The doctor came on the phone and said while this was good news, they wouldn't know about developmental delays until the child was older. I drove to their house that afternoon and Carmen hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. Marcus kept thanking me over and over, saying if I hadn't spoken up when I did, things could have been so much worse. The next morning, I had to drive 3 hours to the federal prison where Reagan was being held. She looked smaller in the orange jumpsuit, her perfect nails replaced with bitten stubs. When she sat down across from me, she leaned forward and hissed that she'd rebuild everything when she got out in 18 months. I told her good luck with that since she'd lost her license permanently. Reagan trying to bribe her with $50,000 through a fake Facebook account really makes me wonder where she got that kind of money so fast. Was she hiding cash somewhere the whole time? She just smiled and said she had ways around that. 2 weeks later, I got called to testify at a health department hearing about new regulations they were implementing. They were calling them the Rodriguez Guidelines after Carmen's baby, requiring monthly chemical testing and anonymous whistleblower hotlines. I spent 3 hours explaining how salons hide banned products and train staff to lie during inspections. The regulations passed unanimously. That weekend, I found out through social media that Elena had gotten married to Reagan's former assistant, the one who'd helped Reagan hide the toxic products. Reagan had introduced them during the trial when the assistant was testifying. Looking at their wedding photos, I realized Reagan had probably planned this from the beginning, another way to hurt me even from prison. Monday was my first day at the new job, and my hands shook as I walked into the corporate office. Everyone there had business degrees, and here I was with just my cosmetology certificate. They gave me a stack of chemical safety reports to review, and every single one reminded me of what I'd lost. My salon, my marriage, my reputation in the industry. But I kept reading because this was all I had left. Sophia called that night with news. She'd saved enough to open her own place with strict safety standards and wanted me as a silent partner. She only needed $5,000, which was most of my small divorce settlement, but I wrote the check anyway. Maybe we could build something better from the ashes. 3 months later, Reagan's lawyer filed an appeal, but the court denied it immediately. Her lawyer dropped the case when Reagan's money ran out, and she got transferred to a facility 6 hours away, making family visits nearly impossible. Diane hadn't spoken to her since the trial. I ran into some of my old clients at the grocery store the following week. Half of them turned and walked the other way when they saw me. But this one woman grabbed my arm and thanked me, saying her daughter wanted to be a nail tech now, and because of what I did, she'd be entering a safer industry. Another woman overheard and came over to say she'd been following the case and wished more people would speak up about dangerous practices. It had been almost a year since everything started when Carmen brought her baby in for the 12-month checkup. The pediatrician ran every test possible, and while they'd stay vigilant for years, everything looked normal so far. Marcus pulled me aside afterward and said the doctor told them that early intervention, getting Carmen out of those fumes when they did, probably prevented permanent damage. He had tears in his eyes when he said I'd saved their child's life by speaking up that day. 3 weeks later, Elena called to tell me about his new wife being pregnant, and while it hurt a little, I was already too busy planning my new salon with Sophia to really care. The divorce had been final for 8 months now, and I'd moved into a smaller apartment near the beach where I could hear the waves at night. Elena sounded happy when he told me the news, and honestly, I was happy for him because we both needed to move on after everything that happened with Reagan. About a year after the whole salon incident, this documentary producer from New York called me out of nowhere saying she'd read about the case online and wanted to feature my story in a series about corporate whistleblowers. I agreed right away because maybe if other nail techs saw it, they'd feel brave enough to speak up about dangerous products in their own salons. The producer flew down to Miami 2 weeks later with her whole crew and set up cameras in my apartment for the interview. 3 days before filming, Diane called asking if she could see me, and when I went to her new apartment near the airport, I barely recognized the place compared to her old mansion. She was living in this tiny one-bedroom with basic furniture from IKEA, nothing like the luxury she used to have before everything fell apart. Diane opened the door and just started crying, saying she was sorry for not stopping Reagan sooner when she knew something was wrong with the salon. She admitted she'd ignored warning signs for years, choosing to believe Reagan's lies because it was easier than facing the truth about what her daughter had become. I hugged her and told her it wasn't her fault, but she kept saying she should have protected those women and that baby. The morning of the documentary interview, I woke up shaking and threw up twice before the crew arrived because I knew I'd have to relive everything on camera. The producer saw how scared I was and offered to postpone, but I told her no, we needed to do this for all the women who might be in danger. My hands were shaking so bad during the interview that they had to stop 3 times to let me calm down and drink some water. I told them everything from the beginning, about the smell, the fake products, Carmen in that back room, Reagan's threats, all of it. 2 months later, when the documentary aired on a major streaming platform, it went viral within days and triggered investigations in 12 different states. Reagan watched it from her prison cell, according to her cellmate, who wrote me a letter saying Reagan threw her food tray at the TV when my interview came on. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from nail technicians all over the country sharing their own stories about being pressured to use cheap, dangerous products. One girl from Texas said her boss made her use the same MMA products, and 3 of her clients ended up in the hospital with chemical burns. Another tech from California said she quit after finding out her salon was using formaldehyde levels 5 times the legal limit. I started a private Facebook group for these women, and within a week we had over 800 members all sharing their experiences and supporting each other. 14 months after everything started, Sophia and I finally opened our own salon that we called Safe Haven Nails, with a big sign in the window listing every ingredient we used. We had our mission statement printed on the wall in huge letters saying we'd never compromise safety for profit, and every client got a card explaining the difference between safe and toxic products. The grand opening was packed with people from the community who'd followed the story, and Carmen showed up with a massive flower arrangement that made me cry. 2 weeks after we opened, I got a letter from Reagan's lawyer saying she was planning to sue me for defamation over the documentary. Her public defender called me the next day and told me not to worry because Reagan had no case since everything I'd said was documented in court records. Reagan kept sending threatening letters every few weeks, saying I'd ruined her life and that she'd get revenge when she got out in 15 years. I just forwarded them all to the prosecutor, who added them to her file as evidence of continued harassment from prison. 6 months into running our salon, Carmen brought her toddler in for the baby's first manicure, just clear polish that was completely non-toxic and safe for kids. We both started crying when she held up her daughter's tiny hand with the pretty nails, remembering how different things could have been if I hadn't spoken up that day. Carmen's daughter was walking now and saying a few words, completely healthy according to all her doctors, which felt like a miracle after what she'd been exposed to. 18 months after the incident, I found myself in Washington, D.C. swinging in in front of a congressional committee about salon safety regulations. I held up a photo of Carmen's baby in the NICU with all those tubes and wires, my voice steady even though my heart was racing. This is why regulations matter, I told them, and the room went completely silent as I explained how one salon's greed almost killed an innocent baby. The committee members nodded as they looked at those photos, and 3 weeks later the news broke that Congress had passed the Carmen Act, requiring federal oversight on all salon chemical imports with mandatory testing and huge fines for violations. I was back home in Miami watching the news when they announced it, and Carmen called me crying happy tears while her baby girl babbled in the background. 6 months after that, I got a letter from the federal prison where Reagan was serving her sentence, and when I opened it, my hands were shaking because I expected more threats or legal nonsense. But it was an apology, probably written with her therapist watching over her shoulder. But she actually admitted she'd put profit over people's safety and said she understood why I'd done what I did. I didn't write back, but I also didn't throw it away, just stuck it in a drawer where it still sits today. About 8 months later, we had my uncle's funeral, and Elena showed up trying to talk to me in the parking lot afterward. I was polite, said hello, asked how he was doing, but when he started talking about how we should be family again, I just walked to my car because I wasn't angry anymore, just done with people who pick comfort over doing what's right. 2 years after everything went down, the state health department showed up at our salon, mine and Sophia's place that we'd opened together 6 months after Reagan's arrest, and we thought we were getting inspected again. Instead, they were there to give us their first ever Excellence in Safety Standards Award, with Valerie's replacement making a speech about how speaking up takes courage, and our salon was the model for the whole state now. The local news covered it and everything, and that night Marcus called to tell me that Carmen's daughter Isabella had just had her 2-year checkup, and the doctor said she was perfect. No signs of any problems from the chemical exposure. You saved her life by speaking up, he said, and I had to sit down because those words hit me so hard. Every Tuesday now I run training sessions at our salon, teaching new nail techs how to spot illegal products, what chemicals to avoid, how to refuse unsafe working conditions without losing their jobs. Patricia training new nail techs every Tuesday about spotting dangerous chemicals is such a smart way to spread knowledge. I wonder how many salons across the country are changing their practices because of what she teaches in those sessions. Last month I was driving to get coffee and passed Reagan's old salon location, now some trendy juice bar with bright green signs, and I sat in my car for a minute remembering that day I walked in and smelled those chemicals. I thought about everything I'd lost, my marriage, half my family, the simple life I used to have, but I knew without any doubt I'd do it all again. Diane called me the next week asking if we could meet for coffee, and when I showed up she looked different, humbler somehow, working as a receptionist at a dental office now instead of living off investments. You showed me that integrity matters more than money, she said, stirring her coffee slowly, and we actually talked for an hour about normal things, slowly finding our way back to something like friendship. Yesterday I got the notification on my phone that Reagan's request for early release had been denied. She'll serve her full 5 years, and I felt relief but no joy, because this was never about revenge. This morning I stood in our salon watching Sophia train our newest hire on our safety protocols, going through every chemical we use and why we picked them, when Carmen walked in with Isabella for their monthly appointment. The little girl ran straight to me with her arms up, and as I picked her up and carried her to the chair, getting out our special toddler-safe polish that costs 3 times what the regular stuff does, I looked around at what we'd built. This wasn't just a business anymore. It was a place where every single person who walked in knew they were safe, where our techs could refuse any service that made them uncomfortable, where pregnant women could get their nails done without fear, where we'd turned my worst nightmare into something that protected others. Carmen smiled at me as I painted her daughter's tiny nails pink, both of us knowing without saying it that this healthy, giggling 2-year-old almost wasn't here, and that speaking up that day, losing everything I thought mattered, had given me something better than I ever imagined. The sacrifice was worth it. Man, this was a fun one. I love just sitting here, wondering about stuff and figuring it out with you. Seriously, this was interesting. Can't wait to do it again sometime. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.